All right, tweeting this out. Let me pop up the chat here. You guys can hear me, right? How do I pop up the chat again? There we go. All right, and we are live. All right. Um, Hold on 1 minute. Just want to make sure it did tweet out. Okay, yeah, it did. Awesome. So we are live, people. Welcome. My name is Danny Segura, and this is my UFC 241 recap. A little bit late. This I wanted to do it on Sunday, but because it's a big pay per view and over MMA fighting, we had a team down there covering the event live. Um, yeah, we just had a bunch of work to do, so I was super busy on Sunday, and then Sunday night I went to a concert. Went to watch Helado Negro. For those who don't know, pretty good musician. Got there a little late. The line was too long. Missed the the performance from Helado Negro, but got to see Cuco, who's all right, and Caliucci's, Colombian, American Colombian artist. She's pretty good. But overall, decent concert. But I missed the musician that I wanted to actually watch. Um, but yeah, anyways, neither here or there. And then today, I was busy. I just got out of boxing practice, so this is the time that I was able to do it. So, like always, as we do in these recaps, I am gonna give you my thoughts on the card. You can ask questions as we go, but I am gonna answer most of the questions at the very end once I'm done giving you my thoughts on the card, which in this case, obviously UFC 241. All right, so let's get right into it. Right at the top, the new UFC heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic, dethroned Daniel Cormier in a very, very, very exciting heavyweight bout. This was a classic heavyweight bout. I mean, if you picture heavyweight greatness, that's what it looks like. Just two dudes with power, tons of power, just throwing, tons of strikes at each other. Amazing chins, back and forth, drama. There was a huge storyline within that fight, and that's ultimately what defines great fights, right? When there's an actual storyline that you can see develop throughout the fight, right? So amazing fight. I think it has to be one of the best heavyweight fights in UFC history. Definitely one of the best heavyweight title fights in UFC history and MMA history, to be honest. That fight was epic. Um, I was surprised. I was surprised by the outcome. I thought Daniel Cormier was going to win this. As you guys may know, for the people that have been sort of following me in the last few weeks and months when this matchup got announced, I wasn't too stoked. There wasn't much build up. There wasn't anything that changed from that fight, from the first fight, and you know, the UFC decided to make a rematch, and I wasn't too stoked about it, but I was wrong. I thought Daniel Cormier was going to win that, and I thought he was going to win that pretty comfortably. Not comfortably, but pretty decisively, and I was wrong. Definitely, I'll take those words back. Stipe Miocic is a great fighter. He's a really, really good fighter. He basically, didn't do all that well in the first 3 rounds. The first 3 rounds, I had Daniel Cormier winning by a lot. I think, for example, the first round could have even been a 10-8. I mean, Stipe barely did anything. Daniel Cormier landed often and a lot. Not only that, took him down, a huge crazy slam, and then from that point on, you saw Daniel Cormier being the better boxer, the better striker. However, it turns out Stipe is the most durable fighter there. I mean, he just took a bunch of punishment, enough that Daniel Cormier got tired from dishing out so much punishment. And then the fourth round, he started turning it up, attacking the body, which was very, very smart read from him. Really, just from a worn down Daniel Cormier, the body shots just took even a greater toll. And eventually it opened up the upstairs portion, and Stipe was able to put him away. So, what happens here? This is very interesting. Obviously, we don't know where Daniel Cormier goes next. He did not necessarily retire after the fight, but he did not necessarily say he wanted to continue on fighting. He basically said he didn't want to make any decisions based on any emotion. So he's going to take some time, talk to his family, think it through. But if I'm the UFC, I think the trilogy is the way to go. I mean, they're 1-1. The first fight was, was what it was, right? It was an awesome performance by Daniel Cormier. The second fight was one of the greatest heavyweight fights we've seen in recent history. You got to run the third one. I mean, the John Jones fight is definitely off the table at this point for Daniel Cormier. At least I have no interest in watching that. Not that I have zero interest, but it definitely died down a lot with that loss. I think if Daniel Cormier would have won and retained the heavyweight title, I think that there would have been a claim there. But with this loss, it definitely kills some momentum for that fight. So I think that the trilogy is the way to go. So I wouldn't mind if Daniel Cormier decides to sit out for a little bit and let Ngannou take a crack at Miocic, and then I don't know if Ngannou wins, then you have a different conversation. But if Stipe wins, then it kind of be the same scenario that we saw with DC having the belt, just reversed, right? Um, wouldn't hate it, but I do think there is unfinished business there. They're 1-1. Daniel Cormier clearly was the better fighter early. A lot of it wasn't really that Stipe was so much better. It was just Stipe was so much more durable. I mean, he just took all the shots that Daniel Cormier could dish out. Daniel at the end looked clearly frustrated when he was doing well and just kept landing, and Stipe wouldn't go down. And then he came back with his own at the very end there. But I think a third fight has to go down. So we'll see. Obviously, it comes down to whatever Daniel wants to do. I think if he wants to call it quits and retire, leave on top, not take too much damage. That's perfectly fine with me. But I think a trilogy fight is the fight. Is the fight to make for both guys. All right, and next up in the co-main event, or the people's main event, how many people like to call it, Nate Diaz defeating Anthony Pettis via unanimous decision. Very very dominant decision. There was one judge that had it 29-28, but for the most part, the other two judges scored it 30-27. I had it 30-27. I think the only round that you could have vouched for Pettis was the first. He rocked Diaz a couple of times. I think he did well in the stand up, but then Diaz got the takedown. Some nice ground and pound, advanced position. So it was definitely a competitive round, but I thought Diaz had the better body of work there. Um, Man, what can I say? Nate Diaz, super impressive. I mean, the guy is off for 3 years, comes back, takes on a former world champion, an active former world champion, because Pettis has been fighting quite often in the co-main event, huge stage. The guy lives up 100%. He looked great fight wise. He was ready to call people out right after the fight, obviously calling out Jorge Masvidal. Um, the guy was built for this. Nate Diaz is built for fighting. Nate Diaz is built for prize fighting for this. I mean, the guy's just a natural. He's a huge star. I mean, I don't know why the UFC, why we didn't get this version of Nate Diaz any sooner. I mean, the guy's clearly is one of the best at doing this. Not only fighting, but part of the promotion, everything, catering to the fans, the media, etc. He's just great. In his own unique style, of course. But man, first of all, that was a very, very exciting fight. I think this is what Nate Diaz needed. Because imagine if he would have came back and lost. There was a few moments that looked kind of dicey for him. I think a lot of the momentum would have gone away. To be honest, nonetheless, still 1-on-1 with Connor, which is always that he can something he can always fall back on. Um, but yeah, this win was huge for him. I remember when in my preview chat that I did for this event, I said two of the people who have the most to lose here are Nate Diaz and Daniel Cormier. Obviously, Cormier took a huge loss, but Nate Diaz didn't. And yeah, he just looked great, man. He just looked great. And calling out Jorge Masvidal, that's the move. Because at this point, calling out Conor McGregor, you don't know if that guy's gonna fight or not. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people got wrong. A lot of fighters at 155 got wrong. We went through that era where everybody was calling out Conor McGregor, and it worked when Conor McGregor was an active fighter because he would either say something back at you, and then there'd be some media, right, some exchange there, and the media would pick it up, um, or there to create some excitement with the fans. But at this point, with Conor not being active and not active for a while, a lot of fighters would call him out. Right, this was prior to the Habib fight, and it would just fall on deaf ears because he's not fighting. And honestly, the calls were saturated, so it was just at some point they kind of became meaningless a little bit, right? So I think Nate Diaz not knowing whether Conor McGregor is going to fight again or not, or whether he's only invested in the title. I think he did the best thing he could possibly do with his time on the mic after the fight, and that was calling out Jorge Masvidal, who's at this point one of the hottest fighters at welterweight. I mean, who's got more pop than him? Not even the number one contender, Colby Covington, I would say, has more hype than him at this point. I think media wise he does, but and performance wise he does as well. But I think, you know, Masvidal with the media and the fans, I think he's really, really, really tapped into something there. So who doesn't want to see that fight? I mean, Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. I've been calling for that fight. I've been calling for that for Nick Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal for forever. Um, so I think that's the next fight to make. I think that's an amazing matchup, and yeah, just everything from a media standpoint, the fight itself, that's 100% the fight to make. But good to have Nate Diaz back. MMA missed Nate Diaz, and yeah, man, it's a bummer when you see that, and you just see everything, the media buildup, the skills, the excitement of the fight, everything. You go, why the hell is this guy sitting out? This guy should be an active fighter. So whatever the UFC needs to do to get that guy fighting, they need to make it right, because it's totally worth it. It's clear that that guy's a star and a draw, and at this point in this era with the money fights, you need someone like Nick Diaz. So yeah, good to have him back. Amazing performance, amazing victory for him. As far as Anthony Pettis, man, that's a bit of that was a tough loss. I'm not gonna lie, because for a while he went up and down, right? Winning, losing, and a lot of losing. I think more losing than winning, to be honest. And yeah, it just wasn't, things weren't looking good for him. But then he goes up a weight class, right? All of a sudden you go, okay, things might change. So there creates, there's some excitement there. He knocks out Stephen Thompson, a legit welterweight, a guy that's fought for the title twice, clearly a legit contender, knocks him out. Beautiful knockout in the second round. And all of a sudden, it seems that there is a change in Anthony Pettis. Oh, the change in weight class. We might get, Anthony Pettis 2.0, and then he loses to Diaz, which, Diaz is obviously a great fighter, but nonetheless, I'm not gonna lie and say that this loss doesn't hurt Showtime Pettis. But I think this fight did give him a lot of exposure, so I think he will be involved in bigger fights in the future as well. But if his pursuit for gold is something that's still on his mind, a loss to Diaz here definitely hurt that. So he can always get back in the horse and build a win streak, but it just puts him that much farther. So tough loss for Anthony Pettis. For those who are just joining, I will take questions at the end. I'm just quickly running down the card and some of my thoughts on the card. I'm not going to go through every fight, but I'm going to go through the main ones and some of the ones I thought are worth mentioning. Then after that, or before that on the card, we had a crazy middleweight bout between Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero. Insane bout. I thought Yoel Romero won, to be honest, but obviously Paulo Costa taking the first round. Second one was close, and then the third one, obviously, I think it went to Romero. But yeah, that was an amazing fight. One of the best middleweight fights we've seen. I think this fight delivered 100%. It was that and more. I mean, that's when you put two jacked up dudes going at it. Yeah, it was super exciting fight. It was a lot of fun. I have a feeling those two would fight again, possibly. I think Yo Romero is at this point where he's not going to go to the bottom of the food chain. He's going to stay lingering on top, and as long as he picks up a winner here or there, he could be challenging for the belt again. Obviously, I think Paulo Costa's next. He's getting the winner by far of Robert Whitaker versus Israel Adesanya. There's no doubt in my mind he's getting the winner of those two. And yeah, I think Yoel Romero picks up one more win and he's there. I mean, you could make an argument he won here. You could make an argument he's beaten the champion before. I mean, the guy's just right there. For some reason, Yoel Romero either wins like by devastating fashion, or he gets into these fights that there's something about his fighting style that just is prone to making fights very, very, very close in a weird way too, because often people think he wins, but he doesn't. It's just weird. I think him and his team need to go back and like look at these fights and then try to figure out what is it that we need to do to be a little bit more convincing in the eyes of the judges, because they're clearly putting he's clearly putting enough effort in there to make a lot of people believe that he wins these fights, just not the right people. Because it seems most of the fans judge the fight for him, but the judges don't. So I don't know. I think there needs to be some reassessment there. Maybe if it's a little bit of more wrestling, even just tying up against the cage, maybe a little bit more control, because the damage is there. He is causing a lot of damage. Maybe is that, maybe shoot a little more. maybe get a little less crazy, control plus the damage that he's already adding on. I think that can go pretty far for him. So definitely need to do some reassessments. But again, it's just minor adjustments. He's right there, man. He's inches away from beating the top level guys. Or, depending on who you ask, he does beat them. So definitely a really good fight. So for Paulo Costa, definitely the winner of Robert Whitaker versus Israel Adesanya. For your Romero, I don't know. I don't know who's at the top right now. Let me pull up the UFC rankings. But it's tough because I feel like he's either beaten most of those guys, and the other guys are the champion Israel Adesanya, who they're booked obviously, and Paulo Costa was the fight to make, and that obviously happened already. So let me peek the rankings real quick. So yeah, middleweight, you got Israel Adesanya, Yoel Romero, Kelvin Gastelum, Jack Hermanson, Jacare Souza, Chris Weidman somehow still in the rankings, although he went up to 205. Then Paulo Costa, yeah. I mean, I believe Jack Hermanson is booked to fight. Who is he booked to fight? Mm, so he beat Jacare last. He's booked to fight somebody. All right. So Jack Hermanson, he is booked to fight. I'll tell you right now. Oh, Jared Cannonier. Okay. Yeah, he could take the winner of that. That would make sense. He would either fight Jared Cannonier, which would be another amazing fight, two bricked up guys, just like the Paulo Costa matchup. It actually, I think it would turn out to be very similar. And or he'd take Jack Hermanson, who's a stud and a very good with his submissions and his ground game. So that could be next for him. But I'd definitely like to see him stick around the top and take on these top guys because it's clear that he's a top contender. And he's figuring things out too, man. We saw the jab. He was working that jab at the end. He's doing the tongue thing too, which I'm not going to replicate here because it might turn into some weird GIF or GIF, whatever you want to call it. But he was having fun out there. His cardio held up. I mean, he looked tired, obviously, but so did Paulo Costa. I mean, it was a very exhausting fight for anybody. There was a lot of output there, but nonetheless, he looked powerful. He moved great. He was, popping that jab, getting a lot smarter with his attacks. The volume went up, which was interesting. He's usually a guy that waited a lot and then boom, explode, right? Um, but in this time, his level of output, kind of not exactly like the Diaz brothers, but there was a lot more than just crazy power, right? He was setting things up, which is unbelievable given his age, what he's 42, and yet he's still evolving, and yet he's still a crazy athlete. I think that's one of those guys that will keep on fighting for a while. I think he's got so much left in the tank. But yeah, tough loss for him. Again, there's something weird about his game that just is prone to these type of close fights for some reason. So I don't know. Very Sadiq Youssef putting away Gabriel Benitez. I really like Gabriel Benitez. He was in the Ultimate Fighter, Mexican, tough dude, tons of power, but it just wasn't his night. And he did look good. He did look good early, putting Sadiq Youssef there in some trouble early. But Youssef is legit, man. Again, I don't really feel too strong about what's next for him, but nonetheless, a guy to keep your eye on. And then to kick off the main card, it was Derek Brunson defeated Ian Heinisch via unanimous decision, 329-28. This was just as impressive as I would say, the middleweight bout we saw between Costa and Romero. I mean, Derek Brunson was kind of left for dead. I'm not gonna lie, by many MMA pundits and fans about like, yeah, this guy just clearly doesn't have it. I mean, he's gonna be a gatekeeper, and that label. And I'm not gonna lie, I put that label on him too, especially after in his prior bout when he lost to Rosanya, right? He beat Elias Theodoro, which is another like middle table. He can't get past the Israel Adesanya. He can't get past Jacare Souza. He can't get past Anderson Silva, Robert Whitaker. These guys that are either on their way up or at the top. And I think with that fight, he kind of proved people wrong that he's still evolving. I mean, his decision making in that fight against Ian Heinisch was very, very good. He was picking his shots. He was being very, very smart about everything. And he is an older guy. He's 35, and you hear something like, they were saying in the broadcast, like he finally has a head coach after all this time. It's like, what, you've been in the UFC and fighting at an elite level, obviously top 10, top 5, and you've never had a head coach. Pretty bizarre, pretty crazy. But yeah, I think that gatekeeper level, we need to wait we need to wait before we really stamp him with that, because he is evolving. He is making improvements. So until you stop making improvements, until you stop improving and evolving your game, you can't put that label on, because we don't you don't know exactly the ceiling. So Brunson's definitely evolving and getting better. So at 35, which is quite bizarre, but he's making it happen. Good for him. All right, and there was a few other things in the prelims. Corey Sandhagen, super impressive, defeating the poor Rafael Sunsao. I think the only thing that a Sunsao had going for him as far as getting a title shot was his win streak. And the media side just never worked out for him. And that's one of the reasons why he never got a title shot, because his resume was there. Uh, and obviously with the loss here against Corey Sandhagen, that gets taken away. I mean, it just does. Second straight loss. I just don't see that guy getting a title shot. He already put a crazy win streak together, and that wasn't enough. Then what is, right? So 2 losses in a row definitely hurt him. And you just wonder what's next for him. And man, it's really a shame. A lot of people, and I've said this millions of times on the MMA Beat, on the MMA Hour before, how oh, Conor McGregor doing this, breaking this, doing that. It's a black eye on the sport. You know what's a black eye on the sport? The fact that Rafael Sunsao never got a title shot in the UFC. What he had a win over the champion then, TJ Dillashaw. It was actually 1-1, right? Crazy win streak. The guy doesn't get in trouble. Always made weight. Reliable. Never got a shot. And now 2 straight losses. I just have a hard time seeing him getting back up there, especially how old is he now? 37, and at bantamweight, that's pretty old. So honestly, that kind of made me sad. Watching him lose kind of made me sad. It's like, man, this guy busted his ass his entire career, did everything by the book, always made weight, always said the right things, never got in trouble, an elite fighter, and just never got a title shot. And look, Mike Brown told me this a long time ago, who's a great coach over at ATT. He goes, hey, man, you could be the greatest fighter, but every time you fight, you're rolling the dice. Every time you fight, there's a certain margin of luck involved, right? You could be so good that you can eliminate it, but not completely. So the more you fight, the more, likely you are to lose at some point. And that clearly was his case. The guy just kept fighting because they never gave him the title shot and eventually lost. And here he is in a position where he was deserving to get that shot many, many times, and he didn't get it. Shame, man. That truly is sad. And that makes you question about whether MMA is a sport or not, because if it was a sport, that guy would have fought for the title. And, stuck around long enough that the young guys came up, like Corey Sandhagen, who looked amazing, super, super good fighter, very interesting style as well. I think he adds an interesting flavor there in the bantamweight division. But yeah, it sucks for us on Sal, but great for Sandhagen. What else? Drakkar Close looked amazing, calling out Gregory Gillespie. Love that fight, by the way. A few other cool things happened. Sabina Masso looked amazing. If anybody wants to ask me about that, I'll get into it. I don't know how much you guys want me to get into Sabina Masso, obviously kicking off the main card, prelim fighter. But yeah, those are my overall thoughts on this card. So I'm going to start taking questions now. So I'm going to go back on the chat and look at what's been asked. And if you want to drop any questions and want to talk about anything specifically, leaving the card, now is your time. So get them in. What's up, compa? Says Mikus217. What's good? ¿Qué más, hermano? ¿Todo bien? All right. MMA on point. Danny's the man. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. I had first 2 rounds for DC. He was gassing. Yeah, it was clear that DC was fading away. A lot of that was because of the shots, and not only that, but a lot of it was because of the shots he was throwing. I mean, you cannot throw haymakers and expect your gas tank to remain the same. Every time you swing hard, that's going to take a little bit from your gas tank. It just is. And unfortunately for Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic is a tough SOB, and he wouldn't go down, right? I think most people would have been out from those shots, but Stipe clearly has a good chin, and it gassed them out, kind of like the whole meme, or not meme, but the Homer Simpson episode where he decides to become a boxer, right? And he can't hit hard. He's not a good boxer, but he's just tough as hell. So he would just take shots from all these guys, and then once they were exhausted, he would just touch them and they would fall over. Obviously, not the same thing. Stipe was clearly hitting hard, and the man has skill, but the concept, the dynamic is there. I mean, he just took the shots, and DC gassed out. But that's how MMA is. That's how fighting works. Let's see. I'd rather fight Cannonier than Hermanson. As far as Yo Romero, yeah, I think the Cannonier Romero fight is more intriguing. Let's see. Duh, 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 duh. Hello, what's this? It's a recap. All right. Any more questions? Why are you here? Because it's my. Oh wait, no. I don't know if that was referring to me, but let's see. How do you Nate and okay? I'm guessing it's how do you see Nate and Jorge match up? That's actually a very very good question, and I don't know if you guys picked that up, but yeah, my neighborhood at night gets popping. Um, yeah, how do I see that matchup? Well, it's a very interesting one. Neither of those guys are wrestlers, so it's gonna be a stand up battle. Both of those guys have volume, right? Um, I think Jorge Masvidal packs more power than Nate Diaz for sure, but I think volume wise, there isn't a clear gap. I think Nate Diaz probably has a tad more volume, but not by a whole lot. But as far as power goes, I think there's a bigger gap there, and that gap goes to Masvidal. And I mean, would you say Pettis has more power than Jorge Masvidal? I would say so. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Nate Diaz was rocked there. There was a couple of times that I'm like, wait, is Nate Diaz actually going to get knocked out here? But he took the punch as well. But there was a few times where he looked wobbly. So, do I think Jorge Masvidal can put him away? Maybe, yeah, if he lands a clean shot like he did on Ben Askren. But I think it'll be that fight was most likely be a 3 round fight, right? Let's face it, it's not gonna. I really don't think, as much as I want it to be, I really don't think the UFC is gonna put in a main event slot because that fight deserves to be on a pay per view, right? That is a fight that fans are willing to pay their money to watch. And pay per views are headlined by title fights. And I have a feeling they're not going to make an interim belt between these two guys. And I also have a feeling the UFC is not going to go through the what is it, baddest motherfucker title that Nate Diaz wants the UFC to make. So I think it's going to be very much like the Pettis Diaz fight in the sense of it's going to be put behind a title fight, whatever title fight that is. But nonetheless, I think unless it's Connor fighting or John Jones, and even then, you could make an argument that Diaz would overshadow that fight, a Diaz Masvidal, right? Because that's a fantastic combination. I think 99% of the time, Diaz Masvidal is going to be the people's main event. Is going to be the fight that people are going to pay to watch, and it's likely going to be a 3 rounder. So how do I see that fight going? I think it's going to be very even. Too early to tell. I need to put more thought into it, but I think it could go either way. But yeah, that'd be such a badass fight. That's some gangster ass fight right there. Uh, Make it happen. I mean, for those that have been following me on Twitter and have been following me for a while, I've been the biggest believer in Jorge Masvidal's brand for a long time. I mean, I've known Jorge and I've interviewed him years ago. And he, unlike Colby, unlike all these other guys, literally he has not changed. So I don't know how all of a sudden he has all this support. Maybe he needed to piece somebody up behind the scenes like he did to Leon Edwards, but the man is the same man that he was 4 or 5 years ago. It's just that I guess fans kind of discovered him now, but the guy is legit. The guy is real as fuck. Like the guy's been like this his whole entire life. This is not an act. And finally, fans are coming around because I mean he has a great personality and one of the most underrated personalities in this sport, Jorge Masvidal. And finally, he's getting some attention. So I'm good for him. I'm happy for him. But yeah, that's a baddest fight. Make it happen. I'm all in for Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. Make it happen for sure. Um, any truth to Kukui being backup for UFC 242? Backup. All right, yeah. So actually, the media asked this today. No, yes. I mean, they've done that before, right? And you never know with Khabib. He has tough weight cuts at times. and this is such a big fight. I don't think if you actually look at that fight is really, I don't want to say the only thing on that pay-per-view, but because I don't want to be disrespectful to the other fighters, but it's certainly it's certainly a top heavy card. I'll say that. So I mean, I'll let you decide. I'm gonna read you the main card right now. So at the top of UFC 242 is Habib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. Fantastic matchup. I'm all in. Next up in the co-main event is Edson Barbosa versus Paul Felder. That could headline a fight night. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic fight, but it is what it is. It's not Nate Diaz versus Showtime Pettis, or that could be the opener of a really good UFC pay-per-view. But yeah, that is your co-main event. Then following that, you got Islam Makhachev versus David Ramos. Amazing fight. I have no complaints, but nonetheless, uh, you know, better suited for a fight night. Then you got Curtis Blades versus Shamil Abdurakhminov. I don't know if I said that right. And then you got who the hell? Mairbek Taisumov versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. Yeah, those are all great fights, man. But nonetheless, I think people really pay their money to watch Habib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. I mean, the other fights are fine, but it's not like UFC 241, right? It's not a UFC 239 card as well. So it's missing a little bit of star power there. So imagine if Habib doesn't make weight or he gets sick or something happens. Yeah, if you just scratch that fight, what you're gonna bump up Edson Barbosa versus Paul Felder as your main event and make that still a pay-per-view. Um, I mean, that'd be a weird business move, to be honest. So my guess, I don't have any info on this, but my guess is that the UFC should try to get Tony Ferguson to be a replacement, a backup, because if Nurmagomedov is out, or okay, let's say Nurmagomedov is out, right? Dustin Poirier versus Tony Ferguson is a legit title fight. Like that is a title fight worthy bout. So yeah, you can make it for interim or whatever. Have Dustin defend his interim title. I don't know. And if the other, if it's vice versa, if Dustin Poirier for whatever reason has to pull out, Habib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson, that's a really good fight. And it would be kind of poetic that it would come together under these type of circumstances. So if I'm the UFC, I think the smart move is to get Ferguson as backup. Yeah, to answer your question. But I don't know. Dana didn't confirm or deny at the UFC 241 post-fight press conference. All right, let's see what other questions we got. I had it 3-0 DC onto Stipe woke or knockout. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, me too. Does the Jorge versus Nate fight happen? And is it a main event? So I just kind of addressed that a little bit. No, I don't think it's a main event because I think that's such a good fight that people are willing to pay for it. And if people are willing to pay for it, it's going to go on a pay-per-view. And if it's going to go on a pay-per-view needs a title fight, or at least according to the UFC. So my guess is it wouldn't be a main event. However, Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 2, and as well the first one, they were both main event fights. So the question here is, does the UFC consider Nate Diaz the same star level as they do to Conor McGregor? If I were the UFC, yeah, make that a main event. That has to be 5 rounds, right? But I mean, we know the UFC is a machine of habits, and they get out of those habits very rarely, and they make the exception for the very 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 highest superstars, and that is Conor McGregor. I don't think Nate Diaz is as big, but I think he's somewhat close, and I do think he's deserved of that treatment of getting a main event bout without having a title. But my guess is no, it wouldn't happen, but who knows. All right. Pat Briault asks, Sup, Danny? How you doing? Would you make of DC in his corner? It seemed he was pretty out of it and not listening to the corner's advice. Yeah, it was very weird at some points. So keep this in mind. I am working. I was actually handling MMA Fighting's Twitter. I was doing the Twitter reactions from Pros React and a bunch of other things and social. So I'm focused on the fight, and then in between rounds, I kind of have the corner of my eye on the screen. But in between rounds is where I get a lot of work done, because I actually want to watch the fight. So I don't pay a whole lot of attention. But I remember clearly seeing, I think it was entering the second, or it might have been entering the third, where Cormier asked his corner if he was winning, and I was like, is he serious, or like it was pretty clear that he was winning. So I don't know if he was confused, or maybe the adrenaline, or sometimes fighters forget what happens with the action. I mean, I've competed in there's tons of jujitsu tournaments in my day, and yeah, when I finish, it's happened to me tons of times when I finish the matches and I have no idea what happened. I have no recollection of the match, and that is with like 20 people watching me at a gym. This is obviously the main event, pay-per-view, millions of people watching at home, an arena full of thousands of people, obviously a lot of pressure. Obviously, also Cormier is much better than I'm not comparing myself to Cormier, but obviously, much more familiar with that type of environment. But nonetheless, I don't know if it was that or he was out of it, or I don't know what was going on. But I thought that was interesting that he was asking if he was winning after, he slammed the hell out of Stipe, ground and pound the hell out of him, was landing tons of haymakers. I mean, it was pretty clear to me that he was winning. And then I also thought it was interesting in the post-fight press conference that that DC was like, yeah, my corner wanted me to wrestle and I didn't listen to them, and I am very disappointed because of that, and I feel terribly. Uh, yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because he wrestled very little, and the little bit that he wrestled, he had a lot of success, tons of success, and wrestling is a good way to start. So if he knew his gas tank was depleting, if he knew he was slowing down, wrestling would have been the answer. And you know, he's got so much muscle memory from wrestling, obviously the Olympics, and that was it's something he did for such a big part of his life that I'm pretty sure DC can wrestle for days. As I'm pretty sure Floyd Mayweather can box for days. So I thought that would have been the way to go about it, especially when he was fading. But for some reason he didn't. So yeah, the corner and the strategy there was interesting. Obviously, I haven't spoken to the corner or DC, so I don't necessarily know what was that all about, but it happens. Sometimes fighters have off nights, sometimes fighters are great at picking up corner advice, sometimes they're not. It just happens on the night. All right. So I just got out of boxing, so I have my little smoothie here. All right. MMA on Point asks, is it fair to say that Stipe may have underestimated DC in the first fight? Got caught with a big punch and totally off guard, but was ready this time for it? Question mark. I don't know. I mean, DC former at that point, he became champ. So DC at that time, current light heavyweight champion, talked about being one of the greatest fighters of all time. Usually the conversation, and often it was him or John Jones. No, I don't think Stipe took him lightly the first time, and he was doing well in that first bout. He did his homework. I just think Cormier was very smart about sneaking that punch in, and the old saying, the punches that hurt the most are the ones that you don't see coming, and I think that was very much the case. Also, um, it's your chin is like this weird thing where sometimes you can take good punches, sometimes small punches rock you. I mean, how many times have we seen in the UFC, a good battle and a guy takes a mean hook and he's still standing, and then a minute later he takes a jab and gets dropped. I mean, I forgot what fight Edson Barbosa fought. Who was it? He got dropped by a jab. Um, let me pull up his record right now, because that's gonna kill me if I don't know it. I think it was. I think it was against Donald Cerrone, yeah, where he just got dropped by a jab, and then you're like, "Whoa, what the hell happened?" But then you've seen him take other fights, like, with crazy strikers, and he takes like, when he fought Paul Felder, when he fought, Anthony Pettis, etc. And he takes crazy strikes and nothing happens, But all of a sudden, at some point in his career, he did get dropped by a jab. Your chin's one of those weird things where like there's no measurement, I think, yeah, he just got caught. He got caught. DC snuck in the punch real well, and that was that. And obviously for the second time around, he had to be more careful, keeping in mind that DC, knowing that DC had the power to knock him out. So I don't think it was a matter of underestimating him. I think it was just he got caught and that was that. But I do think Stipe took him seriously the first time out. um, t- 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 um, let's see. Steve Jobs is on the chat. Wow, he came back. Rest in peace. Um, do you think Leon Edwards will fight Tyron Woodley next? Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there might have been a chance of Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards uh, prior to this Diaz Pettis fight, because if you noticed, Jorge Masvidal did a scrum and he talked. He actually, for the first time, I think, or one of the very few times, he actually addressed Leon Edwards. For the most part, when he was asked about him, he's like, "Yo, he's a nobody. I don't know who he is. I'm not gonna talk about him. He shouldn't even be mentioned. Don't ask me about him." That was sort of his standpoint. And then he took a standpoint where he was like, "Yeah, I know you. You're a nobody," and he actually addressed them and kind of cut a promo there, saying that he would fight him not next, but eventually. And then within that scrum, also he added that he would fight, a non-title bout. He'd be open for it for a very, very handsome fee. And all of a sudden, if the money's right, you would think he'd take any fight. And a fight with Leon Edwards, it wouldn't be the biggest thing in the world, but nonetheless, it was the originator of three-piece and a soda. There's bad blood. Rankings wise, it makes sense, right? They're two contenders. So in my mind, I would have been surprised if they would have booked that bout, but nonetheless, it would have been something in the realm of possibilities, right? But I think with this Diaz call out, I think that fight is so far down the line for Jorge Masvidal that I don't think that's next for Leon Edwards for sure. So a fight with Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley's injured. I don't know when his return will be. Leon Edwards is ready to go, a top contender, and wants to stay active, I assume. Let's pull up the rankings here. I don't think necessarily Tyron Woodley could be next for him, but I think that'd be a good bout next for him. But we'd have to see and check on his health status first. So here are the rankings. Tyron Woodley at number one. How is this even possible? For me, Colby should be number one, right? But we know Usman's going to probably get tied up with Colby at some point. Tyron Woodley injured, right? Jorge Masvidal, that's probably going to go to Nate Diaz. Then Leon Edwards is next. Then Rafael Dos Anjos, Darren Till, Steven Thompson. Jesus. Yeah, he doesn't have many good options here. Um, maybe a Vicente Luque bout. Leon Edwards versus Vicente Luque. I'd be about that. Obviously, Leon Edwards sitting pretty at number 4. I don't think he'd be willing to fight number 14, a very dangerous number 14, right? It's a big gamble with very little pay. But I think that'd be the fight to make. But I wouldn't hate a Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards. I think that's a good matchup as well. Or Steven Thompson is ready to go. I know he suffered a pretty bad knockout loss to Pettis, and he's been recovering from that and doesn't want to get in the cage, rightfully so. At least not now. Uh, I wouldn't mind either. That'd be a good fight. But yeah, but I don't really have a strong preference there, if I'm being honest. All right. Let's see. What is next for Leon Edwards? Yeah, we just discussed that. Yeah, possibly Tyron Woodley or like a Steven Thompson. I'd love the Vicente Luque fight. I think that'd be a great fight. Um, what should be Yoel's next move? 205 or another 185 contender? Well, Yoel Romero weighed in at 184.5, if I'm not mistaken. So championship weight, and he didn't have to make championship weight. It's no question that it's hard for him to make that weight class. But I think if you look at Paulo Costa versus Jorge, what am I talking about? Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero, there was a pretty clear size difference there. Although two jacked up dudes, it was pretty clear that Paulo Costa was the bigger guy. I mean, he was taller and he just looked bigger. And I think a lot of that, and I'm not claiming that I'm 42 here, I'm just 26, but something I've noticed with my own body was that as I get older, I just get heavier. And it's not because I'm stronger. I would actually say at some point in my life previously, I was actually stronger than I am now. But I think the older you get, the longer you linger on this earth. And I don't have any scientific knowledge or facts to back that up with, but your body probably just holds on to minerals and metals and things. And as you get older, even though you're not building more muscle, I think you just tend to get heavier. I think your bones probably get denser. I don't know. But yeah, it's tough for him to make the weight class. But if you look at him, he is a small guy for 205. I mean, he's not very tall. I'll tell you how tall he is right now, at least according to Wikipedia. So Yo Romero is 42, and where's his height? So it says his reach, but not his height. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe on his UFC page. Let's check it out. By the way, I hate the new UFC page. I mean, not so new now, but I think the layout is not so great. His height 72. Is that even accurate? What, 72 inches? Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to spend my whole live chat here, the whole stream talking about his height or looking that up. But yeah, he's not a very tall dude, and I think at 205, some of his assets that make him a great middleweight, which is his athleticism and power, would kind of go away. It would kind of be like the same thing that happened to Frankie Edgar when he dropped down to 145, where like at 155 he was ultra fast, right? Because I mean, he was smaller, he was light, and all those guys had a lot more muscle to carry and move around. And all of a sudden, when he drops to 145, you get somebody like as fast as like Jose Aldo or all these other guys that are a lot more quicker. All of a sudden, Frankie Edgar looks a lot more up to par in speed, and all of a sudden doesn't look like the fastest guy in the division at 145. I mean, I would say Frankie Edgar, obviously now dropping to bantamweight, but I would say Frankie Edgar 145 still was one of the faster guys, but I wouldn't feel as confident to say as he was the fastest guy. Whereas 155 was pretty clear he was one of the quicker guys there. So it'd be kind of the same thing. Like he would lose his power, and he would give up a lot of the things. Oh, he's 6 feet apparently. He's 6 feet tall. It's not that short. But yeah, I think 185 is the way to go. He made 184.5. Yeah, just don't fly him out very far. Don't give him short notice fights, and more often than not, he's gonna make weight. And I think it's just a matter of him, I guess, being a little more not more strict. I'm not saying he's not, but um, he can make the weight clearly. Just it costs him. So yeah, I know. I'd like to see him stick out at 185. I wouldn't hate a 205 fight just to see what he looks like a fun 205 bout real quick. Like remember when Anderson Silva was champion and he would just go up to 205 every now and then and take like not the toughest guy, but he would take on what was it, Stephen Bonner or who's the other guy? Something Irvin. Um, yeah, maybe that would be fine if like an Ilir Latifi versus Gio Romero. That'd be fun. But I'd like to see him be a contender at 185, not 205. All right, let's see. What is next? Is Nate Jorge a number one contender fight to Usman Colby winner? Yeah, I hate to say it. I'm sorry, Leon Edwards, but it is, man. Because I mean, you could make a case that Jorge Masvidal deserves a title shot right now, or at least the winner of Usman versus Covington. So imagine if he beats Nate Diaz, who just beat a ranked welterweight. It would just further that conversation, right? And then same thing for Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz would be on a 2-fight win streak, wins over Jorge Masvidal, Showtime Pettis, plus he's Nate Diaz, and um, he's got a big name. But I don't think Nate Diaz wants to fight for the title, to be honest, and not a wrestler. I think he should just keep doing fun fights. Fight Conor next after that, win or lose. All right. Does Jones versus Stipe happen? Daniel Yerke asks. I think it does. I think it does. Yeah. I think if John Jones keeps being a dominant light heavyweight champion, which I expect him to be, I'm see him losing anytime soon. And I think Stipe is pretty clear he's one of the greatest heavyweights to ever step on this earth. Uh, I think, with DC's days being numbered and coming to an end, I think if Stipe keeps winning and knocking out heavyweights, keep both these guys winning at their respective weight classes. Make this feel like we're really finding out who is the baddest dude in the heavier weight classes. Because if you make it now, it kind of just feels like, again, you win a belt and hey, you get a super fight, you get to fight more champions. No, have them defend their belts. Well, John Jones is already doing that, but have Stipe defend his belt a couple times and then make that fight to see who's the real guy in those heavier weight classes. But yeah, hopefully it happens. That'd be a big fight. That'd be a fun fight. All right. Saul Rodriguez asks, who is most likely to return to title contention, Pettis or Romero? Are they both likely too far removed to make it back? I think Romero is most likely because he's, first of all, fought for the title at 185, right? So he's a former title challenger, whereas Pettis is not at welterweight. And he's come close. He's given enough evidence to believe that he can beat the champion, the current champion, who's Robert Whitaker. Whereas Pettis, he doesn't have that. And again, this fight with Paulo Costa was super controversial. I scored it, 2-1 for Romero. But nonetheless, it was very close. Yeah, Romero's right there. I mean, he picks up one win, and also Romero's styles is very exciting. I'm not saying Pettis is not, but I mean, Romero's just so unique. Imagine he picks 1-2 wins. Let's say if Whitaker's still the champion, I mean, I'd be down to see that too. Let's say if Israel Adesanya, is the champion, I'd totally be down to see Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. Let's say if for some reason, he keeps fighting, Israel Adesanya gets the belt, then Paulo Costa gets next, then he wins. All of a sudden, you can make that rematch being, with the fight being so controversial. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think Romero has a good chance of fighting for a belt again. I think Pettis obviously has the chance to do so. Being a former world champion, being a big name, being a legit martial artist that he is, but nonetheless, he did get pushed back down the line with that Nate Diaz loss. All right, I'm gonna answer a couple more because I'm getting close to an hour here. Actually, let's do an hour, so 8 more minutes. Nice solid round number there. If there's enough questions, of course. Daniel Yerke asks again, what do you think about this card in China? Is it any good? Nah, it's not that good. I mean, the main event is a good fight. It's a title fight, and it's one that I want to see. But other than that, yeah. All right, Jesus Frias asks, Nate, or is this even a question? Nate/Jorge would be a great fight to start the 165-pound division, but we already know Dana's stand on making a new division. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Again, it's more for the matchmakers, more work, another belt. They might even have to hire one more matchmaker because, there needs to be a structure, a line, a cycle, a certain dynamic for a new division, right? It's not like, you know, it does change. It does throw a wrench in the matchmaking. And again, another belt. I think the UFC has a lot of things going on right now. I think maybe a 165 division down the line, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. And have you noticed the talk has died down a lot? And I think it's the answer has been just guys moving up. Before it's like, oh no, I want that weight class. I want that weight class. Stay at one, and we just stay at 155 and keep killing ourselves. The UFC is not making anything happen. So a lot of those guys, Pettis, Diaz himself, what's his face, Kevin Lee, tons of guys just moved up. That's just the way it goes. Fernando asks, DC Stipe 3 then, or should he retire? I thought he looked great. Yeah, DC looked amazing for 3 solid rounds and then faded and DC got the victory. Yeah, like I said before, I think DC still has a lot left in the tank. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you should empty it out. Sometimes it's good to walk away with a little bit left, right? Yeah, I think if the fans feel like, they wanted to see a little bit more of you, I think that's a good feeling to leave on, to be honest. As much as I hate that because, at the end of the day, you kind of want to be satisfied, but at the same time, you don't want the BJ Penn dynamic where you're just like, yep, I am completely done with this. Like, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind he should retire. No, I think if you're wondering, oh, he could have had one more, I think that's good to have. I mean, GSP did that, and look at the way we see him nowadays. I mean, most people think he's the greatest of all time. I think he had the best walkout of MMA of all time, as far as leaving the sport, of course, not walking to the arena. But yeah, I think Stipe, I think DC should get that trilogy fight. If he wins the belt, call it a day and dip out. If you lose, then I think you dip out as well. But I'd like to see DC get that third fight. I mean, it's 1-1, man. Yeah. Let's see. Do you think JP asks, do you think keeping Diaz versus Masvidal from headlining is a method to cap the bargaining power of non-champs? Fights like it are rare, like buying interest, and would give the UFC some leeway on pay-per-views. Yeah, man, 100%. And I get it. I get it. I don't think this is like some evil corporate rule or whatever that the UFC is uh, is using. It's very smart because think about this. Think about the precedent, right? You start Conor McGregor has his own thing, so let's not count him. But the moment you start making main event for pay-per-views, and although I'm all for it, that are non-title fight bouts, all of a sudden it's a very blurry line. Like you could make the case when Ben Askren made his debut against Ben Askren. I mean, that was a big moment. You could have. I mean, what stops him from saying no? I deserve pay-per-view points. I deserve to be the main event of a pay-per-view. What stops? I don't know. Again, because star level is so hard to measure. There isn't like a clear line. It isn't like measuring your weight where you step on the scale and you see the numbers. You weigh this much. No, there's a lot of blurriness, right? It's hard to measure. I mean, there are certain metrics and you can use to measure stardom, but nonetheless, they don't picture a specific level. You don't get a specific number. So all of a sudden, it'll make things very blurry for guys that are famous, that have a name, that could just say, "Hey, why can't I headline this fight?" And all of a sudden, you start getting into a very weird and tricky situation with contracts and whatnot. That could be another headache for the UFC. But selfishly, I'd like to see these two fight for 5 rounds. I think that'd be amazing. I think that'd be fun. I would have loved to see Nate Diaz fight Pettis for 5 rounds as well. Um, yeah. So yeah, it's a tactic from the UFC to kind of just make it clear of who gets the headline, who gets the big pay-per-view cut, right? Um, but yeah, I think if you cross stardom, certain level of stardom, you should be able to override those rules. And I think Nate Diaz has. Whether the UFC agrees or not, obviously that's up to their discretion. But yeah, that's definitely a thing. Mark Carrillo asks, "What's in your smoothie?" So this is what I do after boxing. Um, I buy fruit, frozen fruit, so in these bags, so it doesn't go bad. So I have it in my freezer. And also when I blend it, it has some ice and it's cold, so it tastes and it's a lot more refreshing. And there's like mixed bags, say like berries and carrots and strawberries, blackberries, whatever. And there's different kinds of types of bags that you can get with obviously different combinations. And I put that in my NutriBullet with some ice, some water. Sometimes I add a little bit of orange juice to, add some different flavor to it, and I drink that, and it's delicious. Yeah. Also, a cold Gatorade right after boxing. Woo, that's heaven. It's amazing. All right, 2 more minutes and we hit the hour mark, so I'll bounce out then. Alec Cartier asks, "Salute, Danny. Much love." Thank you. Appreciate it. Nasty Paul says, "Sorry, 5'10" is Romero from most sites." Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, he's 5'10. Although DC's 5'10 and fights at heavyweight. But yeah, I think he's the exception. Yeah, Romero going up to 205, he will give up a lot of the advantages, the physical advantages that make him such a great middleweight. So no, stay at middleweight. Just, I guess, I don't know, figure something out in your diet or something, or lose a little bit more muscle. I mean, Jose Aldo did that at one point. I don't know if people remember, especially around the Mark Hominick fight. Jose Aldo was struggling to make 145. 55 seemed like that was coming. That was coming quick. And then he just made some adjustments, never missed weight. Always seemed, obviously, with difficulty. Cutting weight is not easy, but made it within the normal levels that we see other fighters make weight. And 55 never got brought up again. As far as for a reason to move up of not making weight. Now it gets brought up for exciting fights, but not for the actual weight per se. Let's see. All right, Saul Rodriguez asks, with Sabina's Maso's dominant win in mind, how developed is Colombia's MMA scene? So yeah, that's a good question. There's actually fighters in the rise, especially female fighters. Sabina Masso being one of them. Alejandra Lara over at Bellator, former Bellator title challenger. She's from Medellin. The two actually have fought against each other, and I believe it was a controversial fight because of some weight issue. But I don't have the full details, and obviously it wasn't televised or anything like that. It was like in the regional circuit. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that. I think that'd be a good fight, like a little grudge match at some point. If I don't know, I don't see Sabina hopping over to Bellator, but maybe vice versa, or I don't know. But yeah, um, yeah, it's being developed. Combate Americas has some Colombian fighters, and it's definitely coming up, just like it is in South America, and the UFC recognizes that, and that's why they're now having events in South America outside of Brazil, of course, because I don't consider, at least on talking MMA on an MMA basis, Brazil is not really part of like South America because they're their own market. A lot of that is because of language, and a lot of that is because of jiu-jitsu and how developed MMA is there. I mean, you can't compare it with other countries, but I'll tell you this: Peru is huge for MMA, and there's a lot of Peruvian fighters having a lot of good success. Chile is one of them, and that's why they've gotten to these countries. I thought after Argentina and Chile, Peru was going to be next, but it was Uruguay. Uruguay has some good fighters, as well, and the scene is developing there. But there are very good regional promotions in Peru. That is a hotbed. That is a hotbed, and same for Argentina and same for Chile. That's really the more developed MMA countries in South America, obviously outside of Brazil. Colombia's coming around, but I don't think it's as developed, at least not yet. Um, all right, that's it. So we've crossed an hour, and I have answered all your questions. Uh, so yeah, that is it. I'm gonna call it quits here. It's 9:30 p.m. on my end, and that's it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Here's what you got to do next. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up. There's 30 people tuning in right now to this live chat, and only 22 thumbs up. So hook me up with a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you like as well for more content. Leave a comment if you'd like as well. And that's it. Tell your friends about it. This is a little project that I'm doing, and I'm really happy doing. I'm glad that I'm getting to speak on camera with more frequency, especially live. So yeah, this is fun for me. I hope this is fun for you as well. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So thank you so much for tuning in. You have a good night. Hopefully, you have a powerful week ahead. There's no MMA, at least no UFC event this weekend. So go to the beach, go out, see your friends, go to a nice dinner, do something. But yeah, nice. We're gonna have a nice little break. So that's all I got. Thank you guys for tuning in. Peace.